Hello everybody, this is Derek with Programming with Derek. I want to show you today the Worksheet Selection Change Event, and I have a little bit of code up here. The way that I got to that code or started that code is I just went into a new worksheet and I went Worksheet and Selection Change. Selection Change, I'm guessing, is the most popular one. In this case, I'm not guessing that it's just because it's the last one, because if you go into this workbook, the default one that opens up there is open. So if I delete that and I go workbook, it'll pop up as open. That's neither the first nor the last. Something right around the middle is what opens up there. So Microsoft kind of helps you out a little bit in that regard. So what happens here is anytime a cell is changed or a selection is changed, this event will trigger. And what it passes in is the cell or cells that are selected as a range object. This is something that I touched on in the introductory video for programming with VBA. If you're not familiar with this, please feel free to check that one out right on the same channel. So once we get into this, what we're doing is we're taking each cell or each range in the target of ranges. And what we're doing with that is we're just coloring that interior a random color. So we're using the random function. This just grabs a random number between 0 and 1, and then we multiply that number by this, which is the maximum number of colors that we can have in Excel, and then we end that with statement, and then we move on to the next range. So what happens here is when I select a whole bunch of area like this, you'll see that it populates and it goes across and then down. So when we do that, it just handles each one at a time. One thing to be careful of with this is if you select an entire row or an entire column, it is going to trigger and do all of that. And I did find out the hard way that there is a limit to how much this can do. So just to show you that, and that way you don't have to find out the hard way yourself. I know that it's something little more than 3 columns, less than 4. So what happens here is it's trying to do all of it, and it's going to get to the point where it's going to give me an error message, and there it is. And it just says too many different cell formats. So I'm going to end that. I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out for a moment, and that way I can go ahead and select those cells. And actually I probably could have just left them selected anyway, but just to show you commenting and uncommenting real quick. All right, and actually it says it can't do it with the resources available, so instead I'm just going to do it like that. I was just going to delete those rows, and it said I couldn't. With the resources available, I do have a lot open on this computer right now, but even still, it's an i7 processor and 24 gigs of RAM, so I would expect that it wouldn't be an issue, but that's okay. So I'm just going to uncomment that and just go like that, and I'm back to normal again. So that's a little bit of a fun thing that you can do with it. One thing that's a little bit more productive, I did on this second sheet here, and go into the code here. So what I did here is I made it so that if I am selecting anything outside of the columns or rows, the column headers or row headers that are in there, it's not going to do anything. However, if I select a column header like student 4, it's going to go ahead and go, okay, I'm going to insert a column here, you can go ahead and put stuff in there. So I can just type ASDF and continue on here, and then I can put the student scores in there for each assignment. If, however, I insert a column here and then I click away from it, it's just going to collapse it back down. Same thing with if I insert an assignment and bear with me here. And it is giving me a little bit of an error here. Let's try to find out why and troubleshoot that a little bit. Okay. Oh, I was selecting an entire row, so of course it wasn't doing anything. So when I select that row header, once again, it opens it up and then collapses it when I select a different one. So that is a little bit of how it works. Going through here to show you exactly what happens behind the scenes, what I'm doing here is I am tracking if there's an open row, and I am declaring available a variable up here called open call and also open row. And then coming down here, I am declaring a Boolean variable, and I'm just doing cont, short for continue, both because continue is a reserved word in VBA, so I don't want to use that, and it's shorter to type. So what I'm saying is, if there's a value in open row or open call, go ahead and say that I don't want to continue, because what ends up happening is I get an error message because the target gets essentially deleted when the row collapses. So if I were to open this up and then select a cell in here, it will still get a little bit buggy on me, but that is a bug that I could handle and put additional code in there by selecting cells outside of it and then selecting the cell again. So if I were to do that and then this, it would take care of that problem for me. But I have not added that additional code. But you could if you wanted to do something like this. So going down, if the value of open call is greater than 0, I know that there is a column open. I want to go ahead and then check if there is data in it. So I'm checking the length of the text in that cell. So I'm addressing it by doing row 1, whatever the column number is, checking for text in there. If there is no text because the length is equal to 0, then it goes ahead and deletes that column and then shifts everything to the left. So same concepts down here. If the open row is greater than 0, I check the length, and then if it is blank, I delete that row and shift everything up. Down here, this is how rows and columns get inserted. Again, I'm keeping track of those variables, open call and open row. So what I do here is if I only have one thing selected, and that's another item that's tracked in the range object, is the count of how much you have selected. So if I do this, it's not going to trigger because I have more than one item selected. If I do this, it'll trigger and it'll go ahead and collapse it. So going down here, I just go ahead and set open call to whatever the target column is, or that the column that I'm currently on. And then I also go ahead and do an insert instead of a delete and shift everything to the right. Same thing here with the row. I shift everything down after I go ahead and record that row that's open. And the if statement there, and that if statement, which is checking if the count is equal to 1, and that if statement, which checks if any of this should be done in the first place. And then the sub is ended. So that is the selection change event in Worksheet. Gives you a few things that you can do with it. If you like this video, please like the video and also subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with everything that is coming. And also please feel free to comment. I always welcome any feedback on the channel.